Hey, today I'm going to go over a little more JotunnLib functionality, specifically how to add placeable pieces and interact with them. So to show that, I've created a magic box, which is just going to be a cube with a ball on top of it. This is going to be based off the Workbench prefab, but before I start getting into this, I'd like to go over a couple of the scripts that make pieces function the way they do in game. So I've pulled up the Workbench and the stake wall, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of that. To start with the Workbench, if you click on it, you'll see that it has a few scripts attached. The ones we care about are the piece script, the crafting station, and the wear and tear. Piece is the primary script that impacts placement. For example, you can say which category the piece belongs to within the placing tool, in this case the hammer, and the crafting category. You can also change other properties, such as the resources that are required to build the piece. You can see here that the workbench takes 10 wood. The next script that we'll look at is the crafting station. Crafting station is what makes this piece into a crafting station. You can see that there's a few properties around checking if there's a roof or checking if it needs a fire, and some other effects and properties you can manipulate here. Finally, wear and tear is what impacts how the object will change as it takes damage or if it gets worn by the weather. The way this works is having fields for new, worn, and broken, which correspond to 3 prefabs. If you look here, you'll see there's also a new, worn, and broken prefab attached. Within these prefabs, you can also set sub-prefabs for level of detail. Within new, you can see that when you're close to the object, more detail will be rendered, but as you move further away, there's less detail rendered. If you click on these areas, you'll see that these renderers correspond to the high and low detail objects that are attached. The last thing I'll mention for this script is the fragment roots. Fragment roots targets which object will be the spawning point for all of the pieces that are spawned when the object is destroyed. If we look at the prefab being targeted here, we can see a bunch of different small pieces that will explode out of the workbench when it is deconstructed. Stake wall is a similar prefab but introduces the concept of a combined mesh. Combined mesh is a script added by Valheim, which you can see under the component dropdown. It uses this simple mesh combine option. In effect, simple mesh combine combines everything within an object into a single combined mesh. You'll see here that these pieces line up to create this object. For stake wall specifically, and for several other objects, this is useful to have different destruction points or fragments for the pieces within the object, but to be rendered as one complete mesh. If you look at the base stake wall object, you can see that within the fragment roots, it targets the objects with the individual pieces rather than the combined meshes. For our magic box, we are not going to use a combined mesh, but I thought it would be useful to at least know that that concept existed. To make our magic box, I've changed a few properties. First, I've changed the icon, name, and description for the hammer selection. I've also changed the icon and name for the crafting station. Finally, for wear and tear, I edited the new, worn, and broken objects to show progression of damage to our box, which looks something like this. You'll see that the ball just simply descends into the rectangle. I also removed the low detail section from the level of detail group, which you can just do by right-clicking and selecting delete. That leaves us with only high detail pieces that are rendered. For destruction, I've used the broken base object and just set that to be the spawn point for the ball in the rectangle. You'll see how that works in game. The final thing I need to mention in Unity is the rendering of the placement effect. For some reason, this shader does not get imported correctly. If you go to VFX Place Workbench, you'll need to add a particle shader, something like this. This doesn't exactly replicate the effects in game, but you could tweak it, or you could try to use a different particle shader. There are some under Legacy Particles. You can mess with these, mess with the settings, try to get it closer to the base game shader. I got it close enough and then left it there, but it's an option. After exporting our Magic Box asset bundle, it's again made very easy to get into the game using JotunnLib. You'll see here that we've added a new piece register, which will register our Magic Box as a placeable piece. First, we add it as a prefab, and then we simply register it as a piece into the hammers piece table. Following this, just to have something to craft, I've used the magic armor from the previous video and added a recipe that allows it to be craftable out of our magic box. This is a very simple setup, but hopefully it will show how this operates. Loading in game, we see that our new piece along with the magic armor have been loaded in. In game, you may need to pick up a piece of wood to learn how to craft the new magic box. After doing so, you can access the hammer, bring up its piece table, and see that our magic box is craftable from this menu. After selecting it, we can place it anywhere in the world. After doing so, we'll see that the magic box now has the magic armor recipe attached to it. We can craft that here and see that a new copy goes into our inventory. The final thing I'll demonstrate is the destruction effects that we added to our magic box. If we hit it with the sword, we'll see that it changes state between the ball being higher and then sinking down into the rectangle. Eventually, if we do enough damage, it'll get destroyed and turn into the individual pieces before disappearing. Hopefully that information has been useful, and again, please reach out if you need any help. I'm working on something a lot more complicated for the next one, so hopefully it works. And if it does, I'm hoping to make one pretty soon showing some new ideas that I've had. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.